shenanigans, truth, lies, shenanigans, lies, shenanigans.
Welcome to another episode of Truth, Lies, Shenanigans. I am Nio Nyx, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about Doomsday, the end of the world.
Ooh.
My co-host, you hear him in the background, the lovely Gianni Storm and the rock star Robbie Rock.
Robbie.
Before we get into it, when you were a kid, what was your favorite TV show or movie to watch as a kid? Your favorite?
As a kid?
Man.
For me, my favorite TV shows were That's So Raven. I remember I thought I was psychic for like 10 years growing up. So That's So Raven was huge.
That's
huge
so Raven.
influence.
Oh man, I'm so old.
Wow, yeah. I
Yes.
used to love Battlestar Galactica. As a kid, that was a huge one. But then all the cartoons, but I
That was a
think
big-
G-Force, Gotcha Man, that was the one that really
Oh,
got me into
G-Force.
anime. No, not the hamsters, G-Force. I'm talking Gotcha Man, Battle of the Planets.
I literally
It's
thought of
been
that.
known by several names. But yes, when I heard that there was a G-Force movie coming out, I was like, oh my God. And then my friend said, yeah, don't get excited. This is Guinea Pig. I was like, no, that's so cruel. That's the worst branding ever.
Yeah.
It just kicked a generation of kids right in the throat. God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a
That is
ton
actually
growing
funny.
up. I had a ton of shows growing up. I don't even know that I can name a favorite because I was Incredible Hulk, Wonder Woman. I had a freaking crush on Linda Carter.
Oh, yeah.
Then there was
Who did?
Yeah.
and then there was the cartoons. Thundercats is by
Yep.
far my favorite cartoon of all time.
He-Man,
He-Man,
No.
G.I. Joe. I was
Joe,
had a crush on
Transformers.
She-Ra.
Courage the Cowardly Dog. This is a different generation.
Excuse me.
Courage.
Yeah.
Bill of the Future. Yeah. I can't, for some reason, my mind is drawing a blank, but I literally always watched cartoons and always watched Disney Channel and Nickelodeon growing up.
Wow. All right, well, let's get into this topic where we talk about it all going away.
Oh. Horrible.
No more cartoons for you, Gianni.
Oh my God.
Start us off, Gianni. Go ahead.
All right, guys. Well, we all know by now throughout history, humanity has been obsessed with its end, literally since the beginning of time.
Yep.
We've received predictions and warnings from the likes of astrologers like Nostradamus, to the Mayans, to modern day movies about a climate apocalypse. Take, for instance, the year 2000. So many people thought that computers were not going to be able to recognize the change from 99 to 2000, and that would somehow lead to widespread chaos. These predictions cause fear-mongering, they cause anxiety, and people are always wondering, is the world really going to end and when? But here's the twist. If you guys haven't heard of the Doomsday Clock, it basically acts like a symbolic measure of how close humanity is to causing its own downfall. And midnight is considered the point of global catastrophic disaster. As of January 23rd, 2024, the Doomsday Clock is at 90 seconds till midnight, which is the closest it's ever been to an apocalypse. And it's based on the nuclear threats, the climate risk, and of course our new technologies. So you guys, Doomsday is still considered a fear tactic. Is this truth, lies, or shenanigans? Doom, doom, doom. What do you what do you think, Rob? Do you think it's a fear tactic?
Okay, so I'm glad that you touched base on the clock, because that is something that's measurable. That's something that the scientists are looking at, and as we're precipitating climate change, it's going to be more and more measurable as we get closer, because it's not a 24-hour clock. This is decades. So,
Right.
but we are moving closer. We keep inching our way closer, and that's the terrifying one, that we are manifesting it ourselves. Now, as far as the spiritual use of the rapture and doomsday prophecies, predictions are concerned, these are tools that have been used forever, Johnny. to exert manipulation and control. There, especially now, there are more financial rewards in people doing something
Hmm.
like that, because people who are prepping for doomsday buy en masse. They're getting ready to
Yeah.
hunker down, right? Or they're more willing to liquidate their assets and give it to their spiritual leaders because they're going to die. They don't need it.
Right.
It's a way to isolate and separate people. It's a form of psychological manipulation. And these people are absolutely abusing their power. We have seen so many spiritual leaders who have done this.
I agree with Robbie for the most part. Um, I'll just say that I personally think the doomsday clock is BS
Okay.
because one thing it doesn't take into account is future tech to solve some of these problems. So
Mm.
most of the doomsday predictions have to do with climate change,
Mhm.
pandemic, all those things. And that's what mostly,
Or
it doesn't really take into account natural doomsday issues, but these are where humans kill
man-made.
themselves, right?
Hmm.
I think we're not taking into account that we as humans also have technological advancements that can solve a lot of the problems that may arise because of the things that we have done. I know our sea levels are rising, but sea levels have risen in the past and
Hmm.
we have survived. And a lot of us will die in the process,
My
but
God. Wait.
humanity and the earth and the world will survive. Even if we have another pandemic, the pandemic is unlikely to wipe us out completely.
The
So,
whole human race
yeah,
gone.
now if we're talking apocalyptic,
Meteorites
yeah,
and
we're talking about asteroids, some super
yeah.
volcano or nuclear war.
Right.
Now that's one that we might survive, but most of the earth will suffer.
Yeah, it would.
Like I said, I think the doomsday clock is a little bit of BS. So it is what it is on
Okay.
that.
To be honest with the doomsday clock, a lot of people think doomsday and the end of the world is fantasy. We've heard it before. They've been saying it since 1914 and before that. But the thing is, though, they have some legitimate warnings. Like you guys said, the nuclear part of it. There was a movie recently that talked about like a civil war, and it starts in this country, and then it could go to Canada, and then it can go to other countries. And then there's just almost like this one world order. But that in a sense is a doomsday because it may not wipe out humanity but the general population. So I think that there's some legitimate like warnings. People are like, oh, that's going to be years, that's not going to be in our generation, our time. I don't know if that's so true either, and I
Well,
personally think that there will be an apocalypse.
some aspects of climate change are 100% measurable. I watching a documentary about the Ganges River, for example, the glacier from which it stems is melting at an alarming rate, and scientists predict that imminently
Oh my
that
God.
glacier is going to be done. And now, if you think of the importance of the Ganges River to the
Mm.
people of India, spiritually and just from a survival perspective,
Yeah.
okay, that's apocalyptic. And to me, the real doomsday, though, is measurable.
Hmm.
And it's about 5 billion years from
Thank you.
now when
There we
our
go.
sun burns out.
Yeah.
When our sun starts burning out, we will then start seeing the end
That's
of life
that's
on Earth.
damn near guaranteed.
That one,
But how do you,
so
now we're getting
So we,
into,
we can calculate that
because
effectively.
how can you
it's a
calculate
nuclear
that?
furnace that's
But
burning out. It's a
quick,
nuclear furnace that is burning out. It's burning hydrogen atoms. It will event. It's a finite supply.
yeah. Think about if you have like a grill with propane outside and you're continuously lighting the fire on the grill, eventually it's going to run out of gas. That's just how it works. So scientifically, that's
Stars
going to happen.
work.
But let's go back to this
Yep.
Ganges River thing that you was talking
Yeah.
about. So yes, water levels are going to rise and it could be apocalyptic for that area, doomsday for that area. But what we're not considering is as water levels rise, it also brings water to other areas that don't have it.
That's
So
not
One,
necessarily good though.
no, they're bringing. It's going to bring salt water to those areas.
no, 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 no,
Yeah,
no, no, no,
that's
no, that's not
damaging.
necessarily. No, not necessarily. And
Really?
even if it did bring salt water, we have, again, technology to desalinate, which is actually becoming significantly better and easier. But the point
That's true.
is, even if it creates rivers, new streams, etc., even if it creates more rain, more snow, because
It's horrible.
that's what climate change is doing, is creating more rain, more snow in areas that may or may not have had it before. So yes, climate is going to change. Yes, we're going to have these issues. And yes, humanity is fucking things up. Yes,
Yeah.
to all of those things. But we're calling it doomsday, but we're not considering there are still pros to the greenhouse effect. Even if we're talking about natural selection, we're talking about adaptation, we're talking about mutations. Matter of fact, it's probably a good thing for humanity because it can create some more mutations that we need because
Neil's
we
basically
have
saying
gotten
let them die
comfortable.
out.
No.
We have
He's
gotten
saying
too
let people
comfortable.
die out.
I'm not saying that
No.
necessarily.
He's saying that.
Wiped out at a lower level of species that are being eliminated because they cannot adapt fast enough.
Other
They don't have the
species will.
technology.
That's horrible.
Oh, but what
To
it's doing
quote,
to our
to quote
biosphere,
Jeff
to our
Goldblum,
ecosystem.
life finds a way.
Wait.
It will, but it does. Yes, life will find a way when the rash that is humanity
It's gone.
eliminates itself from the
The
game.
rash.
I will not disagree
then
with that.
the Earth will have a chance to heal from said rash, and new life will propagate. Maybe another higher order of intelligence will evolve. Who knows?
Yes.
But time is ticking. 5 billion years.
Time.
Time is ticking.
But
Humanity is messing itself up, but I'm just
Big
saying
time.
the world will still be here until 5 billion years from now at the maximum, because we still could have asteroids and other things and another
so you
planet
guys are
could
kind of
collide
like
into us.
okay with dooms. It's turned
I'm-
from
I'm not
is it a
okay
fear
with
tactic
it.
to like let it happen.
But you did bring up that it's a fear tactic, right? That's what your question was. Is this a fear
Yeah.
tactic? And it is a fear tactic because
Okay.
truth be told, global warming is not going to destroy humanity immediately, at
Okay.
least. there will come a point in time
know.
where if we continue at this level as we are, eventually the planet will destroy itself. But it's not,
The
Absolutely.
environment will become as such that we cannot survive.
we can't breathe,
Yeah.
right? But I still believe there will be humans that will be able to survive, especially as the
Elon
ones
Musk?
that are causing the problem die off, hopefully.
Yes.
Like you say. All right, but real quick. So since we're talking doomsday, let's talk about
Yeah.
the prophecies and let's talk about things like Revelations and the Christian Bible. And let's talk about some of that, because if you're talking about fear tactics, Revelations is a pretty intense story
It's
about
scary.
it tries to be. It's not that scary to me, but it tries to be pretty scary, right? Because it's reason it's not scary to me because it seems so unrealistic. It's not
It's
wrapped in realism to me. It's more like reading a fiction novel to me. Revelations specifically.
I don't know.
Because I honestly, and I think Rob and I may look at this differently. I look at the Bible as a flawed historical book because, again, all of our history books today are flawed. If you go to a school in Tennessee versus a school in New York, the history books are flawed. They're different. So I think the Bible is a flawed history book. But I think Revelations is specifically a book of fiction. Somebody had a dream. One of the prophets had a dream that was pretty interesting, because I've had some
Extremely
crazy
graphic and
dreams.
detailed.
I've had some crazy graphic, detailed dreams that I have started writing books about, as a matter of
Yeah,
fact.
multiple people on accounts have all agreed to seeing this very same prediction.
Who is multiple people that agreed to the book of Revelations? Who is this that saw
Multiple people in the Bible, just like when they were
Because
accounting
Revelations
for
was written by
Jesus.
one prophet, I believe. Who was it? I can't remember who the prophet was that
It
wrote
was written
Revelation.
by one
Was it
prophet.
John?
That is true.
I think John.
It was written.
A character in a story cannot validate the authenticity of the book in which it is contained. I'm sorry. That's like
No.
Deadpool talking to you in the fourth dimension, breaking the fourth wall.
Wait, no, that's not what I meant. I meant that
100.
there are multiple
No.
people that have predicted the same thing, that Revelation, they're all agreeing on
I
the
see what you're
same
saying.
vision is basically what I'm saying.
mean,
Yeah,
but
the
that's
same
just-
prediction.
But that's because people listen. If Rob wrote a book,
Neo.
wait. If Rob wrote a book about his dream and where life was going to go, and I read his book, I might see the same vision that he wrote, and I might share the same vision that he wrote to someone else. So,
Product of your subconscious.
right. So Revelations to me is a book of
No.
fiction, and it was written as I thought by John the Apostle. So there was one
Hmm.
person that wrote this book who could have had a dream or an idea or a thought or whatever it was, and then wrote about it. Because if you read Revelation, it's a wild story.
It is crazy. It is
Mhm.
it is insane.
It's
But
something
to
out
be
of a
fair
dream.
though, a lot of the books in the Bible are very difficult for people to just pick up and, oh, I get what that means. I know exactly what that means. That's not when you read the Bible,
Mm.
that's not the case. Some people say that the Bible's in parables. Some people say the Bible's literal. I think that the stories in the Revelation specifically, since we're talking about it, I think they use symbolism. I don't think that they were at that time very literal or knew what they were seeing. And I think absolutely they had a higher inspired vision for it. I don't think they just willy-nilly from their
So
subconscious. I absolutely
yeah,
believe
no,
it was
it,
inspired.
it absolutely comes. It is inspired, Johnny, but
Hmm.
it's inspired from another group of storytellers. Have you ever heard of
No,
Zoroastrianism? Okay, it's one of the world's
no.
oldest religions. It
Okay.
predates Christianity by centuries. In the Abrahamic faiths, it predates it by centuries, which is just
Okay.
wonderful. So they do have an end times prophecy where it is a final battle between the forces of good, led by the god Ahura Mazda, and evil, the devil Ahriman. So you have this showdown of good versus evil that ends in the death and renewal of the world. And
Of
this is a story
humanity.
that's been propagated before Christianity puts out the book of Revelations. So they've copied elements of that story and appropriated it to what they believe, to what suits their values, what will instill fear and obedience in their flock. If you don't follow our way,
No.
this is the path for you. 100. The book of Revelation is meant to scare you into
It's definitely about
being
fear
the best
mongering.
Christian you can be.
No. I think it can be scary because people are thinking if I sin or if I don't follow this religion, I'm going to hell or I'm going to die in this apocalypse. Yeah, of course. We all think we're going to die now, though, if we're thinking about the apocalypse and have no religion to it. Because if we think that climate change is going to happen, then of course we're going to die. We're going to be either by a huge flood or it's going to be burning. Like there's going to be different ways that we die, so the fear is there regardless. I think what the Bible does in Revelation specifically,
Yeah, specific.
I think that it is informative. It's saying, hey, these are the end times. This is what it looks like. I
Have
love
you really
Rob's
read? I just
expression.
curious. Have you really read Revelations though? Have you really read
Yeah.
it? Have you
Have
read
you
it?
read it?
Through and through, no.
See,
Through and through, no.
that's
That's
part of
the
the
problem.
problem. I've read it through and through, and it is a book of
But that's
fiction. And
you read it with the lens of this is a book of fiction instead of
no,
with
no,
an
no, no,
open
no, no, no,
heart.
no,
No,
not
no,
when
no,
I.
no, no,
No,
no,
that's
no,
not
no.
true.
When
I
it's
was not reading
talking
it with
about
that lens.
flaming
Okay.
dragon with 7 heads descend,
Yes,
it,
it's
it's
symbolic. Think of the
it,
seven with the seven heads or with those certain beasts
What was John the
symbolize.
Apostle symbolizing with that?
He wasn't,
Think about
he didn't
his.
come up with it.
Think about his
God
time
did.
frame. Think about his time frame,
oh,
not our time frame, right?
I know.
Because we're trying to make it fit to what we understand the world to be now. So we take a book written 2,000 years ago and try to conceptualize it to make it fit our world, right? But I need you to think back to 2,000 years ago and stories about dragons. Where does that come from 2,000 years ago? Think about, what he's saying. Is it really symbolism? What is the symbolism from his perspective when he wrote the book? Because we can't look at it from our perspective and assume to understand his vision.
What he was saying, right.
Right. We have to try
But
to understand his perspective, which is virtually impossible if we're being realistic.
yeah,
Uh,
it is. It is. But
So all I'm saying is that trying to make it make sense and understand the symbolism is, you really have to be in that time frame. You have
when
to
it's
be in his
obvious,
head. But when
I
is it
don't know.
obvious? What's
I think
obvious
what
it's
is
about
just
it?
obvious.
You got to.
It's
I
literally
tell you what.
saying
I
earthquakes,
tell you
floods.
what.
It's literally verbatim saying
Okay.
what are the end times looking like. And
And we've
people
had
argue, oh,
all of those
we've
time.
always had that. It's a
Throughout his
difference.
time.
Johnny, those stories were written in an area of the world where tectonic shifts were happening and earthquakes were prevalent. An
Oh
earthquake
my
typically
God.
meant
It's
death.
true. There were a
Okay,
lot
so
of
the story, I'm
earthquakes.
giving you facts. I'm
Yep.
giving you
Okay.
facts.
Okay.
It's
Like
currently there's a lot of earthquakes.
that's
Wasn't there an
exactly
earthquake
what it is.
recently in the Middle East? In-
And if there's a global flood, for example, there's no evidence of a global flood, but in that part of the world during that time, it was very prone to flooding, coastal flooding and plain
The
flooding.
area
So
was.
if you live in an area and 10 square miles
Mhm.
is flooded, the
You think the
world
world is
has
Okay.
been
flooded?
flooded. The
All
world
right.
has been flooded.
But don't you think that when you read something that you may have a pre-bias to it or a bias? Even me, when I go into the Bible, I believe in the Bible. I believe in God's word. So I believe it is God's word. So I'm looking at it with that lens. I wouldn't look at it like, oh, let me be skeptical.
Yeah, no, so let me tell you when
So,
I read the Bible. I started reading it back to back when I was like, I think I was still in elementary school at the time. I think
oh, you're a child.
I was like 12. So I didn't read all of it back to back at 12. I read it later back to back. Um,
Okay.
but I had read Revelations specifically at that time. And at that time, I was very into God. I remember one time I stole something from CVS with a friend of mine in
Yeah.
elementary school. And I'm sitting there with the Bible, hugging it. Protect me, protect me.
Oh, Neo.
That's how into the Bible I was at the time. I was like into it when I was reading Revelation. Of course, it didn't make sense to me even as a 12-year-old, but even later,
Right.
as more skeptical, I'm like, yeah. Now,
And the lens that I had when I read the Bible, Johnny, is I was a young adolescent and I had ambitions towards priesthood. One of my best friends was my priest. I was
Interesting.
heavily involved in my
Oh,
church as a young
wow.
boy, very heavily involved in my
What?
church. Um, Reading the Bible and not having anyone who could provide me with any type of reasonable answer.
so we're gonna save that part for a different conversation because we might need to get into
Okay.
the Bible and his and religion. I was just talking really about Revelations,
Please.
and
Yeah.
I was just curious about that.
Story in
But
the Bible.
And the
but there
end
but
days.
there are other prophets that Gianni mentioned throughout time that have
Mhm.
predicted end times, and she mentioned Nostradamus, and there's been a
Oh,
few
yeah.
others.
Astrologer.
So, do we believe that there are people that have the ability to see the
Predict.
future and predict some of these things and actually see into the future?
Yes. I do believe psychics
Nostradamus
exist.
Nostradamus specifically used his technique was he had a small reflecting pool that he would look
Hmm.
into. He'd hit the ether and then he would just write and write and write and write. I could sit down and write you a list of 15,000 predictions over time.
Something's
And I
going to hit.
promise you, some of it is going to stick, some of it
Yeah.
won't. But most of Nostradamus's predictions are vague and unfulfilled. So
Mm,
it's like, hey, The Simpsons predicted it. The Simpsons have predicted everything. It's the
literally.
same concept. If you throw
Okay.
enough shit at the wall, something's going to stick.
What do you think, Gianni?
Despite what Rob said, actually a few of his predictions did actually come through. And he hasn't written that many that didn't.
To be clear, my friend,
Yeah.
Nostradamus wrote up somewhere in the neighborhood of 942 little poems that are predictions.
Oh.
Only about 6 of his predictions have come true.
But they were the biggest predictions though. They
Dude,
were
it
there were
doesn't
some
matter. It doesn't matter because
good
it
point.
demonstrates, 6 out of 1,000 is still less than 1%. So he had no special
Mm,
ability or gift. He was just tossing stuff out there. So he's as much a predictor as the Simpsons writers are.
okay.
To Robbie's point, he did predict a bunch of apocalyptic events in specific years, and clearly we're still here.
That's
Yeah.
I mean
Rob's right. The Simpsons have written about as many.
They've been right about more things than Nostradamus has. It's
They have predicted a
ridiculous,
lot.
man. Yeah.
but in general, I think that psychics do exist. I think that people can foretell the future. I think that there's not one person that can 100% tell the future, but there are people that are seers and visionaries and psychics. Yes, I agree. I've seen
Actually,
them. I've heard them.
I'm going to agree with you, Yanni, because I think there are people that can see, well, what we perceive as seeing the future. I think we
Future.
can
Yeah.
experience the future. I think there are people that can experience the future because, so when I was a kid, I used to I used to have deja vu a lot. And I know we talked about this in our previous episode,
Yeah.
but I used to have deja vu a lot as a kid. And I was confused by it because there would be literal moments, and it was maybe about 30 seconds, right? Where I'd be in a moment and I'm like, this exact thing happened. And I could even start to point out what's going to happen next. And there's been a couple of times where the period of time was long enough where I could literally say to the person next to me that this is about to happen. It's been twice that's happened to me.
Wow.
There was another time when I was younger, I used to have really, really bad migraines. And
Me too.
it was horrible, but we were trying to fix the washing machine. It's something had happened to it and we couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. And so I was trying to help my dad figure out what was wrong. And then I looked at the washing machine and the deja vu hit me. And I looked at it and I said, oh my God, I've seen this, to my father, right? I've seen this. I had to have been like 10, 12 maybe, 10 or 12. I said, oh my God, I've seen this. And
The exact scenario.
the exact scenario. And I looked behind it wasn't behind the wash machine, but like behind the wash bin. I knew, I visualized in my head that there was a sock there and the sock was blocking it. I visualized it in my head. I wasn't washing clothes or anything. I just happened to come down and I visualized it and I reached back where I recall it being, went out, picked out the sock like I had put it there.
Wow.
And all of a sudden it worked. And my dad was looking at me like what the fuck?
Wow.
I mean,
that's
Did
so
Did
weird.
you sleepwalk it there as a child?
right, did I
Maybe
sleepwalk
do
it?
that?
See,
I know.
I know exactly where this is.
The practicality.
And it wasn't even my load of clothes because I guess my dad was washing, or somebody was washing clothes. And
You were only
it
10.
was earlier that day. So they were washing clothes and then it got stopped up. I was uninvolved with the washing machine during the course of that day.
Strange.
And so it was weird. So that has sold me on the fact that there are people that can see. And if you know, scientifically, Einstein has made it very clear that time is just an illusion. There have been studies that have shown that there are specific portions of our brain to force us to see time linearly, that process time linearly. But the truth of the matter is that is not how time works. And mathematically, that's not how time works. So there was this study that they did on mice, and they've also done it on humans, that show when we process time, our time perception is flexible and subjective. It's kind of shaped by what we do and how our brains synchronize the data from all of our senses, right? In essence, our brain constructs our sense of time based upon our interactions and perceptions rather than real-time accuracy.
Okay.
Take, for example, like when you see fireworks, light travels to our eyes much faster, so we see the fireworks. Sound takes a little bit longer to get to our ears because it travels slower, right?
Okay.
But what our brains do is it puts them together and makes it seem like they're happening at the exact same time. So basically, our brains are making it up as they go because everything happened like milliseconds prior to the time we actually process it. So nothing for us happens in real time, right?
What?
So we are hardwired to follow time linearly, even though it may be happening. So I actually believe that, I'm not
That's
talking
interesting.
destiny, but I believe that time happens. The
All at
past,
once.
present, and future exists. So I think there are certain people that have the brain capacity to experience time out of order. So I believe that there is possible that we can experience time in the future, time in the past. I think it's possible. I feel like I have done it. That's where I'm speaking from. People with mental illness is another point that I'll make. Like they have done studies on people with mental illness. You believe they're crazy, but they may be just experience a different reality than us, right?
Literally.
And they may be actually better than us because they can
More advanced.
experience more than us. They have, instead of that linear brain capacity that we have, they may be able to experience reality out of time or they may be able to experience other realities. I don't ascribe to the multiverse theory necessarily, but I do subscribe to time being non-linear.
Non-linear.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I can agree to that, definitely.
Yeah.
The thing is, too, when it comes to predictions and psychicism, I think everybody can be psychic because, like you said,
I
Neo, I
think so
don't
too.
think time is linear. I don't know. I predicted some stuff in my days, so
Yeah. Did you know? Speaking on time, real quick, did you know that time, because gravity affects time as well,
Yep.
but
yeah.
there's a time difference between the people in space right now and us. So they're actually younger. So the longer you live in space, the younger you
No.
are. Yeah. Even their cells have been proven to be younger. So when they come back to Earth, they've tested their cells and their cells are younger. There's a time difference depending on gravity.
Yep,
Yep.
they've sent atomic clocks up into the stratosphere, and when they return, then they're off.
Off.
They're just off.
GPS has to be, the
What?
GPS satellites have to be adjusted for time. And if they're not adjusted for time specifically, your location will be off.
That's
Like I
insane.
say, time is an illusion. We just see it the way we see it. We experience it a certain way. So I don't know. So these predictions, I think it's
That's
possible.
crazy.
I don't know that I believe them all, but I think that it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for the most part, guys, it can be used as a fear tactic, but a part of me knows that there is some truth to the whole doomsday. And yeah, at the end of the day, we still have today. We have our time to make changes with ourselves and hopefully collectively, but doomsday is a fear tactic. Is this truth, lies, or shenanigans?
To me, this is very true. Very true. Whether
True.
it's coming from spiritual leaders who are looking to flex some kind of influence, or scientific and political bodies that are sounding the alarm, saying, hey, we need to cool things down. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
definitely some truth to doomsday because it's coming. And the big one for humanity, it's coming before the Earth.
coming.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, if your question is it only a fear tactic? There's no question it's a fear tactic. I think we could all probably agree it's truth. But if you're saying it's only a fear tactic and it's
Yeah.
not real,
Only.
like doomsday is not real. No, doomsday is real. I'm going to say shenanigans. So I'm on the fence. Certainly a fear tactic. But are predictions possible? Sure. Absolutely.
Of
I think they're
doomsday.
absolutely possible on doomsday, that someone has seen the end, can see the end, and knows what's about to happen. And one of them could have been right. I think it's absolutely possible. I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetime, but who knows? Who
I hope
knows?
not.
Other than that person who saw it.
Right.
This is deja vu.
It's deja vu.
The planes
Oh, you
are
know,
falling.
oh, the world's about
Seems
to
familiar.
explode. We have 30 seconds and the world's going to explode. That's
Stepping outside.
Seems
Oh, the
all
lake is
so
on.
familiar.
The lake is on fire. Oh, time for everyone to die.
the lake is on fire.
I know exactly what's going on.
The horse, there's a horse out
Yeah.
here. There's 4 of them. What?
No, don't start talking about Revelation. On the next episode, you guys see, we're gonna get into it. But
No, we
right
might have
now,
to say
we're
that for
gonna
our season finale. That we're going to have to
For the
really get
season
into
finale?
the Bible. Yeah, we're going to have to do that.
yeah. I think this is shenanigans. I'm on the fence. I think there's the fear-mongering, but I do believe that the end is coming.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. This was a really deep conversation about doomsday. We talked about everything from Nostradamus to global warming to revelations. So let us know what you think. Are doomsday predictions just about fear-mongering? Go to podsnetwork.com, PODZ. Go to the episode, leave us a comment, share your thoughts. With that said, I'd like to thank Rob B, Gianni Storm, and of course, as always, we've got to thank you for listening to our shenanigans every week. We'll see you next week.